What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Charles Oliveira en route to Abu Dhabi, response to Islam Makhachev and critics. Former UFC lightweight champion Charles Oliveira is currently en route to Abu Dhabi, where he will look to reclaim the title that was taken from him by the Arizona Athletic Commission earlier this year. The news comes on the heels of fans and Islam Makhachev collectively pointing out that Du Bronx himself said that he planned to be in Abu Dhabi 20 days before the fight. Once the quote resurfaced, there was some concern among the MMA community that something could potentially be afoot at the Shoot Box Academy. Thankfully, with the recent Instagram post, Oliveira has put to rest worries that he would be cutting things too close to the fight. In a photo where the self-proclaimed uncrowned champ can be seen holding a sign informing fans that he was bound for Abu Dhabi, he sent a stark warning to his opponent saying, "Calm down, Dad is coming. Hello Abu Dhabi." With just 2 weeks to go until the bout, Oliveira will have some time to acclimate to the change in environment. With that being said, however, it's no secret that Abu Dhabi has been a tough setting to fight in. When Dustin Poirier challenged Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight belt at UFC 242, the ringside commentary team couldn't help but point out how incredibly hot it was inside the arena. The heat added an incredibly difficult element to the grappling exchanges in the fight, something that could play a factor in the upcoming UFC 280 showdown between Oliveira and Makhachev. With Makhachev and his team already there, fans have been left to wonder as to whether or not the late arrival of Charles Oliveira will play a role. In addition to having problems making weight in his last appearance, the former champion missed weight several times at featherweight before making the jump to 155. Hopefully, after the weigh-ins on the 21st, we have an official lightweight title fight on our hands. Sean O'Malley wants Conor McGregor levels of superstardom. When Sean O'Malley steps into the octagon on October 22nd, the streaking young star will encounter a pivotal crossroad. If he's able to defeat former interim champion Peter Yan and cement his place as the bantamweight #1 contender, he will without question become one of the biggest draws in the UFC. It would put O'Malley's career on a trajectory similar to the likes of superstars like Conor McGregor, who quickly ascended the UFC rankings with spectacular finishes en route to a world championship. If he loses, however, his stock likely won't drop given the fact that at the present time, he isn't even a top 10 ranked fighter, but it would put a considerable halt to his ongoing hype train. O'Malley certainly knows the stakes going into the bout. During a recent episode of DC and RC show, Sugar Sean spoke about the fight, saying,
"People want a superstar. You know, there's really no one in UFC right now that is that Conor level. Me, I go out there and beat Peter in spectacular fashion. I'm climbing. I'm not going to be there yet, and I know that, but I'm climbing to become that guy. I want to be that guy. I want to be the Conor. I don't want it to be competitive towards like, well, you're up there with this. I want to be that guy."
With less than 2 weeks to go until O'Malley and Yan step into the octagon to square off in what many presume to be a #1 contender fight, fans are incredibly eager to see how things play out. Although O'Malley is currently the betting underdog in the fight, champion Aljamain Sterling believes Sugar Sean could surprise a lot of people and come out with a high volume of strikes to jump out to an early lead on the scorecards. It sounds like it's anyone's fight when the two men set foot inside the octagon. And before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Michael Bisping weighs in on Mark Zuckerberg's Cageside appearance at UFC Apex. Leading up to Mackenzie Dern's recent showdown with Yan Xiaonan, news surfaced that fight fans and media members would not be in attendance at the UFC Apex for the card. The news took many by surprise and fueled theories that the Meta CEO rented out the facility for a private viewing of the card. After the event, however, it was revealed that Zuckerberg didn't privately rent out the facility after all. He was invited as a special guest. In a recent YouTube video, UFC Hall of Famer Michael Bisping weighed in on Zuckerberg's appearance at the UFC event, admitting that it was cool to see and would probably help bring new fans to the UFC. Because Zuckerberg isn't a traditional UFC fan, his attendance at events could give other people who may not ordinarily watch fighting a reason to tune in.
Yeah, the acceptance from a wider audience, because he's not typically who you would think the Just Bleed MMA fan. I used to say my mother-in-law, you know, she's a very she's not what you would describe as your typical MMA fan. When she first started watching it, she fell in love with it straight away. You know, and I think when people do watch it with an open mind, they will.
Zuckerberg has recently taken a significant interest in combat sports. Prior to his attendance at the UFC Apex, videos had surfaced of the billionaire training MMA and looking surprisingly skilled for someone who hasn't been training for a very long time. Although Zuckerberg's attendance was purely as a fan, the MMA community couldn't help but speculate as to whether or not there could be some potential partnership between the UFC and Meta going forward. Whether or not Zuckerberg's interests translate into any sort of business dealings remains to be seen, but in the meantime, it sounds as though the MMA community has accepted Zuckerberg into the folds of its fandom. Next up, UFC books 2 thrilling contender fights for January. January is shaping up to be an exciting month for fight fans. In addition to several fight night cards, we have a huge UFC 283 pay-per-view card on deck that will see Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno collide for the 4th time for the Flyweight Championship. This week, the UFC announced 2 fights for upcoming cards that could prove to be potential Fight of the Year contenders. The first one takes place at UFC 283, where light heavyweight contenders Paul Craig and Johnny Walker will meet in an exciting showdown. With Craig ranked 9 and Johnny Walker ranked 11, the winner will likely secure a spot in the 205-pound division's top 10 ladder when they are released the following Monday. The number 9 ranked Craig will be entering into the bout after losing a 3-round decision to Volkan Oezdemir at UFC Fight Night London earlier this summer, while Walker is coming off a submission win over Iwan Kutalaba that saw him snap a 2-fight skid. The second exciting bout that was announced this week will take place at UFC Vegas 67 on January 14th. The card, which will likely be held at UFC Apex, will see welterweight contenders Jeff Neal and Shavkat Rakhmonov fighting a bout that has all the makings of a Fight of the Year contender. Both men have been on tears as of late, with Neal recently defeating Vicente Luque via KO in August. On the other hand, Rakhmonov has managed to remain undefeated over the course of his professional career, rattling off 4 straight finishes since entering the UFC at the end of 2020. When the two collide in January, the bout is sure to produce fireworks. With the 2 fights coming up sooner rather than later, we want to hear from you. Who do you think wins these 2 showdowns? Sound off in the comment section down below. Last up, Paddy Pimblett and Tito Ortiz predict Anderson Silva defeats Jake Paul. Later this month, UFC legend Anderson Silva and controversial internet personality Jake Paul will square off in a highly anticipated boxing match. With just weeks left until the 2 men meet inside the ring, anticipation is undoubtedly building. During a recent episode of his Chad and Pony podcast, fan favorite fighter Paddy the Baddy Pimblett spoke with guest Tito Ortiz to discuss the upcoming bout. Considering the fact that Ortiz recently lost to Silva inside the ring himself, many were eager to hear how he thought things would play out. The former UFC champion weighed in on the boxing match, saying,
"It was, I guess, one of the best strikers in MMA history, and he's coming up on the fight now against Jake Paul, and I don't think Jake Paul is going to make it out of 3 rounds. I mean, that's my opinion, but I think it's going to be a great fight because I know Jake Paul puts in great work."
Pimblett agreed with his guest, adding on that he believes that Silva is one of the GOATs and should find success against someone like Paul without as much experience.
Yeah, he is. As you say, he's one of the GOATs, definitely, and I'm with you on the prediction as well, though. I can't see Jake Paul getting out of 3. There's no chance. He's gonna realise what it's like fighting an actual striker, and he's gonna get bingoed.
With the clash between the Spider and the Problem Child just weeks away, we want to hear from you. Do you think Silva gives Paul a rude awakening while becoming the first man to defeat the former Disney star inside the ring? Or will Paul deliver another vicious knockout and shock the world? Give us your predictions for how things play out in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.